What's up, peers, and welcome to Bitcoin to the Max, here again on the World Crypto Network. Now that we have established that Bitcoin has an inflation rate, but because it is voluntarily agreed upon, there is no theft happening, right? There is no involuntary violation of private property. However, that's not the only issue with inflation, right? The Cantillon effect leads to malinvestment and overconsumption, right? When we increase the money supply, and especially so in a debt-based fiat system, this means that money is artificially cheap, and that therefore individuals go into debt just to consume more. To buy the third huge flat screen TV, and to buy that Lambo with credit, and to get this extra large house, just, well, because the money is cheap and it's created out of thin air anyhow, right? That is overconsumption. And on the other hand, you have malinvestments on the side of the entrepreneur, because even for the most nonsensical projects, he can get a loan for it. He can get the financing done, and then he does not have to do the tough calculation if what he's doing is actually useful. So he is going to invest in something that he thinks others might like, but he doesn't know for sure because, well, the people don't directly pay for it, but rather indirectly with inflation, with the shifting of the purchasing power. And this is an economic law. This is, in fact, with every currency at any time with any individual. That's praxeology for you. It's logic, and logic applies anywhere. But how specifically does this apply in Bitcoin, and is this actually a problem? Well, the question is, what is being produced and what actually is being consumed? Well, first, the inflation subsidy with the Coinbase goes to whom? Well, correct, to the miner. And what is the miner doing? He is accumulating proof of work, and thus he is creating valid Bitcoin blocks. And valid Bitcoin blocks contain space for transactions. So the entrepreneur, the miner, is in the business of producing block space, valid block space, and ordering these transactions in it. And thus, when you have an artificial stimuli for incentivizing the hashing, for incentivizing mining, this means that you put too much hashing power onto this problem. You start mining with the biggest farms that you have, and you create huge data centers, and you continue on mining, maybe even at a net loss in general, but don't care too much because you are subsidized by inflation. You get your hands on freshly minted Bitcoin, and that is quite nice, actually. But this also means that you might put too much capital into producing security, and thus, in the long run, this might not be as useful as you think it is. And on the other hand, we have, well, the average user of Bitcoin, because he is consuming block space. You're making a transaction, and you do pay a transaction fee. And that, of course, goes to the miner as a direct payment for the service of providing proof of work and ordering the transactions. But there is a huge subsidy for the block space in form of inflation. Thus, a big part of any transaction cost, and especially in the early days so, is the inflation subsidy, an indirect payment for the block space. Thus, there are users who overconsume on block space. We have, for example, a probably nonsensical app such as Satoshi's Dice, which wastes tons of block space, or, well, megabytes of block space with gambling. with, honestly, a rather nonsensical thing in general, but in a way that all the full nodes have to carry the costs of the overconsumptions in block space. So we have overconsumption of block space, and we have malinvestments in security. Where does this lead to? Well, again, praxeology tells us, logic tells us, that sooner or later there comes a correction. For the consumer, eventually he has to pay with a direct payment. And that is the transaction fee. And we've seen this over the last years, and I would argue we're going to continue to seeing this in the near future, very much so, with higher transaction fees. Now users actually have to pay what they're getting directly with every single transactions that they make. Right? So transaction fees are soon going to adjust to the true direct price, which are going to be much larger. And on the and we also see that stuff like Satoshi's dice is no longer profitable because of these high transaction fees. The overconsumption now actually shows, which is good because we want to live prudently and not waste block space, right? So batch your transactions, use SegWit Back32. Then further, right, we have the overconsumption, which sooner or later will be the malinvestment in additional security, which sooner or later will be realized. Thus, we currently see the huge run-up in hashing power, exponentially so, because it is subsidized with inflation. And it might be that a lot of these entrepreneurs are doing malinvestments in their hashing power, which they do not yet even realize, but sooner or rather they will, which will mean that they will have to shut down their operations and turn off their hashing computers. Thus, I would argue we might see a decrease, maybe even a crash in the hashing power because all these entrepreneurs will realize that they have done malinvestments. And especially currently in the downturn of the price, the purchasing power of Bitcoin, this means that a lot of these miners already are no longer profitable. They have miscalculated, and now they are turning off their hashing power. Well, we're still seeing rather a large increase in total hashing power, which, to be honest, might be a bit concerning. Because again, praxeology, it's logic. And inflation just simply always leads to overconsumption and malinvestment. It's curious to see, though, that might be an unpopular opinion, but I would argue that we have already seen the increase in the transaction fees, and we will see in the near and very much so in the distant future a drastic increase in direct transaction fees. And on the other hand, I would argue that we will see a rather drastic decrease in hashing rate when all these malinvestments are uncovered. But of course, this is the free market, and free and sovereign individuals are very good at problem solving. And not sure what's going to happen, and I'm definitely not going to sell my Bitcoin because of that. But, well, curious to see. But this might be actually a rather large problem in Bitcoin that I'm very certain the honey badger will deal with. Pierce, thank you very much for not malinvesting your time, but actually over-consuming on WCN content. These puns are ridiculous. I'm sorry. Pierce, thank you for your support on tallyco.in/HillebrandMax, where you can get early access to, well, Bitcoin to the max. And you can overconsume as much as you like on hopefully this valuable content. I for sure hope that I'm not doing malinvestments here and putting these shows out there. Thank you very much, and see you all on the next show. Bye-bye.